Introduction. Welcome to 100 Mind-Blowing War Stories, an audiobook designed to make you say, "No way that actually happened." From unbelievable heroics to bizarre battlefield twists, this audio journey dives deep into the strange, wild, and often jaw-dropping moments that history class somehow forgot to mention. Ever heard of the time a pigeon stopped an airstrike? Or when a pirate queen outmaneuvered entire empires? What about the soldier who mailed himself to freedom? Or the general who forgot his army? These stories, and 96 more like them, are waiting for you inside. Each one has been carefully selected to surprise, entertain, and remind us that in war, truth is often stranger than fiction. Whether you're a history buff, a trivia lover, or just someone who enjoys a great story, this audiobook offers something unexpected in every chapter. You can listen straight through or jump to any story whenever you're in the mood for a dose of the unbelievable. There's no wrong way to explore this wild ride through the past. So get comfortable, maybe brew some coffee or dig a trench, and prepare for an unforgettable journey through the most outrageous, inspiring, and mind-blowing moments in the history of warfare. Let's begin. The soldier who saved D-Day. During the Normandy invasion, a lost paratrooper may have changed the course of history with a bag of bugles. Private John Steele of the 82nd Airborne was one of thousands dropped behind enemy lines in the early hours of D-Day, but his parachute snagged on the church steeple in Sainte-Mère-Église, leaving him dangling helplessly above the square during a fierce firefight. He played dead for hours as German troops moved below him, eventually being taken prisoner, only to escape and rejoin his unit days later. The delay caused by the battle in the town, sparked partly by Steele's unexpected appearance, helped Allied forces secure a key route inland. Today, a parachute effigy still hangs from that same steeple in his honor. The ghost army that fooled Hitler. The Allies created an entire fake army, and the Nazis fell for it. During World War II, the U.S. military deployed the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, better known as the Ghost Army. Their mission? Trick the Germans using inflatable tanks, fake radio transmissions, and sound effects blasted from massive speakers. These master deceivers staged more than 20 battlefield illusions across Europe, convincing enemy forces that major Allied units were in places they weren't. In one operation, they faked an entire division, complete with tire tracks, fake generals, and phony chatter, helping divert German attention away from real troop movements. Their top secret efforts weren't declassified until the 1990s. The pilot who chased a bomber on foot. When his bomber took off without him, he sprinted after it and caught it. During World War II, U.S. pilot James Howell was preparing for takeoff in his B-17 Flying Fortress when the brakes failed and the plane began rolling down the runway. Without him, with no one at the controls and the engines roaring, the massive bomber was gaining speed. In a moment of pure adrenaline and desperation, Howell ran after the plane, climbed aboard through an open hatch, and managed to stop it before it crashed into anything. His quick thinking not only saved the aircraft, but also the lives of everyone on the airfield. To this day, it remains one of the most bizarre aircraft takeoffs in military history. The spy who wrote in invisible urine. A British spy used his own pee to send secret messages. During World War I, British intelligence officer Mansfield Cumming, yes, that was his real name, discovered that urine could be used as invisible ink. His agents were instructed to write between the lines with their bodily fluid, which would later be revealed by heating the paper. The method was surprisingly effective until it started to smell. Eventually, the intelligence service switched to chemical alternatives, but for a time, this bizarre technique was a legitimate espionage tool. Cumming is also credited with founding what would become MI6, and his experiments in secret communication laid the groundwork for future spycraft. The samurai who fought in World War II. He charged into battle with a sword and survived. Takeo Sasaki, a Japanese officer during World War II, brought ancient tradition into modern warfare by wielding a samurai sword on the battlefield. While most soldiers carried rifles, Sasaki charged into enemy lines during the Battle of Saipan with a katana. Witnesses claimed he cut down multiple American troops in close combat before being wounded and captured. His actions weren't just symbolic. Japanese officers often carried swords as both weapons and emblems of honor. Though rare, there were several accounts of sword-wielding charges during the war, but Sasaki's is one of the few where the samurai survived and lived to tell the tale. The POW camp that fooled the Nazis. Allied prisoners built a fake war camp inside a real one. In Stalag Luft III, a German POW camp during World War II, Allied airmen orchestrated one of the most daring escapes in history by constructing a fake escape operation to distract from the real one. While guards watched a decoy tunnel and monitored suspicious activities above ground, the prisoners were secretly digging 3 full-length tunnels named Tom, Dick, and Harry. Their decoys included fake uniforms, forged documents, and even a wooden vaulting horse used to hide dirt disposal. On the night of March 24th, 1944, 76 men escaped through Tunnel Harry. While most were recaptured, the sheer brilliance of the plan shook the Nazis and later inspired the film The Great Escape. The general who played dead. He survived a massacre by pretending to be a corpse. During the brutal Katyn massacre of 1940, Soviet forces executed over 20,000 Polish officers, hoping to wipe out the country's military leadership. One man, General Władysław Anders, miraculously escaped the slaughter, not by fighting, but by playing dead. After being shot and dumped into a mass grave, Anders regained consciousness and lay perfectly still among the bodies until nightfall. Covered in blood and dirt, he crawled from the pit and fled to safety. Against all odds, he later commanded Polish forces alongside the Allies and became a national hero. His survival became a symbol of resilience in the face of unspeakable horror. The nurse who rescued a Nazi general. She saved the enemy and changed the war's course. In 1943, British nurse Jean Rennie was treating wounded soldiers in North Africa when she discovered one of her patients was no ordinary German. He was General Wilhelm Ritter von Thoma, a high-ranking officer captured during the Second Battle of El Alamein. Rennie's expert care helped nurse him back to health. And during his recovery, von Thoma let slip key details about Hitler's prized Vive 2 rocket program, details British intelligence had been desperately seeking. His accidental confession, overheard by M16 through hidden microphones, helped accelerate Allied efforts to sabotage the program before it could wreak havoc across Europe. The soldier who captured 132 alone. One man, one machine gun, total chaos for the enemy. In 1918, during World War I's Meuse-Argonne offensive, U.S. soldier Alvin C. York found himself and a handful of men ambushed behind German lines. With most of his unit pinned down or killed, York charged forward alone, taking out a machine gun nest with precise rifle fire and his Colt .45. He continued to advance, shooting and capturing stunned German troops as he went, eventually rounding up 132 prisoners by himself. His solo assault was so unbelievable that military officials initially didn't believe the reports. York was later awarded the Medal of Honor and became one of the most celebrated American war heroes of all time. The pigeon that saved a battalion. A bird flew through gunfire to stop a bombing. During World War I, a carrier pigeon named Cher Ami delivered a message that saved nearly 200 American soldiers. The lost battalion had been trapped behind enemy lines and was being bombed by their own artillery, who thought they were German troops. With their last hope resting on a pigeon, the men released Cher Ami, who was immediately shot through the breast, blinded in one eye, and had a leg hanging by a tendon, but she kept flying. Against all odds, she delivered the message to headquarters in time to stop the shelling. She was awarded the French Croix de Guerre and stuffed for display. Hero status fully earned. The sub that sank a train. A German U-boat took out a train from the ocean. In 1918, the German submarine U-156 pulled off one of the strangest attacks in World War I history. After surfacing off the coast of Orleans, Massachusetts, the only World War I attack on U.S. soil, the crew opened fire with deck guns on a nearby shipyard and surrounding area. As shells rained down, a passing train carrying military supplies happened to be in the line of fire. The U-boat's shells hit the train, derailing it and causing chaos inland, all while still floating offshore. Though the damage was limited, it was a shocking reminder that even trains weren't safe from the sea. The war that was over in 38 minutes. History's shortest war barely got started. In 1896, the Anglo-Zanzibar War broke out between the British Empire and the Sultanate of Zanzibar, and it ended 38 minutes later. After the Sultan refused to step down following the death of a British-backed ruler, the Royal Navy opened fire on the palace. The Sultan's forces were quickly overwhelmed. His palace was destroyed, his artillery silenced, and his yacht sunk in the harbor. By the time the smoke cleared, the Sultan had fled, and a British-approved successor took power. It was technically a war, but it barely lasted long enough for breakfast. The woman who became a pirate queen. She led a navy against the British Empire and won. In the early 1800s, Qing Shi, a former Cantonese prostitute turned pirate, commanded one of the largest pirate fleets in history, over 300 ships and 40,000 men. When the Qing dynasty, Portuguese Navy, and British Empire all tried to stop her, she defeated them repeatedly in open sea battles. Her naval dominance forced the Chinese government to offer her amnesty. With full rights, wealth, and even the freedom to keep her loot, she retired peacefully, ran a gambling house, and died of old age, a fate nearly unheard of for pirates, let alone pirate queens. The soldier who escaped by rowboat. He crossed the North Sea alone, in a rowboat. In 1941, Norwegian resistance fighter Jan Balsrud was the sole survivor of a Nazi ambush during a covert operation. Wounded, frostbitten, and hunted across the Arctic, he trekked through snow-covered mountains, dug himself into a cave to hide from search parties, and even amputated his own frostbitten toes with a pocket knife. But the wildest part? He escaped to Sweden by rowing a small boat over 80 miles across the icy North Sea, completely alone. He survived, returned to fight, and later became a national hero in Norway. His journey remains one of the most harrowing survival stories of World War II. The war that started over a bucket. Yes, a wooden bucket triggered a full-blown war. In 1325, tensions between the Italian city-states of Modena and Bologna exploded after Modenese soldiers stole a wooden bucket from a Bologna city well. It wasn't just a prank, it was seen as a national insult. What followed was the War of the Oaken Bucket, a bloody conflict involving thousands of troops. Modena defeated Bologna at the Battle of Zappolino and kept the bucket as a trophy. To this day, the infamous bucket is still on display in Modena, proudly showcased as a symbol of one of the strangest causes of war in history. The battleship that refused to sink. It took 24 hours, 85 bombs, and still it floated. During the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, the USS Nevada was the only U.S. battleship to get underway during the assault. Japanese bombers targeted it aggressively, hoping to sink it in the harbor and block the channel. The Nevada was hit with multiple bombs and torpedoes, set ablaze, and still kept moving. Eventually, to avoid sinking in a critical spot, the crew beached the ship intentionally. Even after being battered for over a full day, she didn't go down. The Nevada was repaired, returned to service, and later took part in D-Day and the invasion of Okinawa. Some ships are just built different. The exploding animal bombs. The Allies tried turning bats into tiny bombers. In one of World War II's stranger experiments, the U.S. military developed bat bombs, tiny incendiary devices strapped to real-live bats. The idea was to release them over Japanese cities, where the bats would roost in wooden buildings before the timed explosives detonated, causing widespread fires. Codenamed Project X-Ray, the plan actually worked in tests. One trial accidentally burned down a U.S. airfield. Despite initial success, the project was scrapped in favor of the atomic bomb. Still, for a brief moment in history, the military genuinely believed bats might win the war. The army that froze in place. An entire invasion force was defeated by weather. In 1812, Napoleon Bonaparte led over 600,000 troops into Russia, the largest army Europe had ever seen. But instead of facing defeat in battle, Napoleon's Grande Armée was wrecked by winter. Russian forces used a scorched earth tactic, retreating while burning villages and supplies. With no food, warmth, or shelter, soldiers froze by the thousands. Temperatures plummeted to minus 30 degrees Celsius, minus 22 degrees Fahrenheit, and by the time the army limped back to France, fewer than 100,000 men remained. The disastrous campaign shattered Napoleon's power and proved that sometimes the fiercest general is nature itself. The president who went to war. A sitting U.S. president fought on the front lines. In 1814, during the War of 1812, President James Madison became the only sitting U.S. president to enter an active battlefield. As British forces advanced on Washington, D.C., Madison personally rode out with American troops to scout the front lines. He even armed himself with a pair of pistols. Though he didn't fire a shot, his presence during the chaotic defense of the Capitol was real and risky. Hours later, British troops invaded and burned the White House. Madison narrowly escaped, but his battlefield appearance remains one of the most daring and surreal moments in presidential history. The soldier who played dead twice. He faked his death, then did it again to escape. British soldier Eddie Chapman was a safecracker turned spy during World War II, and his life played out like a Hollywood script. Captured by the Nazis while imprisoned on Jersey Island, Chapman convinced them he was willing to spy for Germany. After parachuting into England, he immediately turned himself in and became a British double agent. When the Gestapo suspected something, Chapman faked his own death to throw them off. It worked. Twice. He fed false intel to the Nazis for years, earning their Iron Cross, while secretly working for MI5. Few spies ever played both sides so effectively and survived. The time Switzerland accidentally invaded. They crossed the border by mistake. In 2007, a group of Swiss infantry soldiers on a night exercise accidentally invaded Liechtenstein, a neighboring country with no army. Poor weather and outdated maps led the troops about a mile over the border before anyone realized the error. When the Swiss government apologized, Liechtenstein officials calmly replied they hadn't even noticed. No shots were fired, and the entire invasion ended with a chuckle and some diplomatic backpedaling. It remains one of the most polite and harmless military blunders in modern history, and a reminder that even neutral nations can have an off day. The pianist who fooled the Nazis. He survived the Holocaust by playing Chopin. Polish-Jewish pianist Władysław Szpilman was hiding in the ruins of Warsaw during the Nazi occupation when he was discovered by a German officer, but instead of arresting or executing him, the officer asked him to play the piano in a deserted house. Szpilman, weak and starving, played a haunting Chopin piece that moved the officer to tears. The German, Captain Wilhelm Hosenfeld, secretly brought him food and supplies for weeks, saving his life. After the war, Szpilman became a celebrated composer, and his story was later immortalized in the Oscar-winning film The Pianist. The Navy blimp that landed empty. The crew vanished mid-flight without a trace. In 1942, a U.S. Navy blimp called L-8 took off from Treasure Island in San Francisco Bay on a routine patrol for enemy submarines. Hours later, it drifted back inland and made a soft crash landing in Daly City. But when rescuers arrived, they found something chilling. The cabin was empty. Both crewmen had vanished without any signs of struggle, damage, or distress. Parachutes and life vests were untouched. The blimp was intact. Despite an investigation, no definitive explanation was ever found. It remains one of the most eerie, unsolved mysteries of World War II. The dog that became a sergeant. He started as a stray and outranked some soldiers. In World War I, an abandoned pit bull mix named Stubby wandered into a U.S. Army training camp and was adopted by soldiers of the 102nd Infantry. Smuggled aboard a ship to Europe, Stubby became a battlefield legend. He warned troops of gas attacks, located wounded soldiers, and even captured a German spy by grabbing his pants and holding on until help arrived. His bravery earned him the rank of sergeant, making him the first dog ever promoted through combat. Stubby returned home a hero, met presidents, and marched in parades, proof that not all war heroes walk on two legs. The city that surrendered to a dummy. A cardboard tank convinced them to give up. In World War II, the Allies devised a bold bluff to liberate the French port city of Le Havre. Rather than risk high casualties, they deployed fake inflatable tanks and artillery, backed by loudspeakers simulating engine noise and fake radio chatter. The Germans, unaware it was all a ruse, believed a full-scale invasion force was outside their gates and surrendered without a fight. This wasn't the only time deception won a battle, but Le Havre's fall to rubber tanks and clever sound effects remains one of the greatest cons in wartime history. The general who lost to emus. Australia went to war, and the emus won. In 1932, Australia launched a full-scale military operation to combat an unexpected enemy. Emus, Thousands of the large flightless birds were damaging farmland in Western Australia, so soldiers armed with machine guns were sent to eliminate them. But the emus were faster and smarter than expected. They scattered, dodged bullets, and outmaneuvered trucks. After weeks of effort, the soldiers had used thousands of rounds and barely made a dent. The operation was quietly called off, and the emus emerged victorious. The so-called Emu War remains one of history's most unintentionally hilarious military campaigns. The prison camp built from Monopoly. Secret maps and tools were hidden in board games. During World War II, the British government partnered with the makers of Monopoly to aid prisoners of war held by the Nazis. Special edition Monopoly sets were sent to POW camps through fake humanitarian organizations. But these weren't ordinary games. They contained silk maps hidden under the board, real money mixed with play cash, and even tiny compasses and files tucked inside the pieces. The games helped hundreds of Allied prisoners plan escapes across occupied Europe. It was one of the most clever and successful uses of civilian products for covert operations in the entire war. The assassin with a candy box. A bomb disguised as chocolates nearly killed Hitler. In 1943, British intelligence devised a plot to assassinate Adolf Hitler using an explosive hidden inside a box of fancy chocolates. The plan was for a double agent to smuggle the deadly sweets into the German High Command's dining area, where Hitler often snacked. The box looked elegant and harmless, but once opened, it would trigger a deadly explosion. The plot was foiled when British officials leaked the plan, fearing the assassination might backfire politically. The chocolate bomb is now a bizarre footnote in espionage history, and a chilling reminder that even desserts weren't safe in wartime. The battle fought after the war. They didn't know the war was over, and kept fighting. On December 16th, 1945, more than a month after World War II officially ended, a Japanese holdout unit on Morotai Island in Indonesia launched a surprise attack on Allied forces. Unaware that Japan had surrendered in August, the soldiers had been hiding in the jungle, cut off from all communication. Believing the war was still raging, they staged a raid on an Allied airfield, wounding several before being captured. This wasn't an isolated case. Some Japanese soldiers held out for decades, refusing to believe the war had ended. One of them, Hiru Onoda, didn't surrender until 1974. The blind man who shot down a plane. He couldn't see, but he never missed. During the Winter War between Finland and the Soviet Union in 1939, Finnish soldier Arne Juutilainen wasn't just a crack shot, he was nearly legally blind. His eyesight was so poor he couldn't serve in most roles, but his uncanny hearing and reflexes made him a legend on the front lines. During one Soviet air raid, he used only sound to fire a rifle at a low-flying plane and hit it. The aircraft crashed nearby, and Juutilainen became a national folk hero. His story blurred the line between myth and truth. But the downed plane was real, and so was his shot. The cook who came back to life. He was declared dead. Then he made breakfast. During the 1941 sinking of the British battleship HMS Prince of Wales, cook Leonard James Callaghan was thrown into the sea and presumed drowned. After hours in the water, rescuers gave up hope. But later that day, back on a rescue ship, someone noticed smoke coming from the galley. Callaghan had climbed aboard unnoticed and started making eggs. Soaked, shivering, and half-conscious, he simply wanted to feed the crew. When asked why, he said, "Someone had to." His reappearance stunned everyone and earned him the nickname the Ghost Cook, the spy who wrote in invisible music. Sheet music became a secret code. During World War II, Noor Inayat Khan, a British Indian spy and accomplished musician, served as a radio operator in Nazi-occupied France. To avoid detection, she used musical notation as code, disguising messages inside fake sheet music. Her training in classical composition allowed her to embed phrases, coordinates, and even dates between notes, rests, and clefs. German agents never caught on, at least not until much later. Despite eventually being captured, she never revealed a single secret under interrogation. Her courage and creativity earned her the George Cross posthumously and a permanent place in spycraft legend. The library that defied the Blitz. Books stayed open while bombs fell. During the Blitz in London 1940, the Bethnal Green Library refused to close, even as bombs rained down around it. With blacked-out windows, sandbags at the doors, and readers crouched between shelves, the librarians kept serving the public. When the building was damaged, they moved the entire library underground into the London Tube, offering books, story time, and even classes deep below the city streets. It became a sanctuary for knowledge and calm in a world on fire. Their motto? Never close, never stop, and they didn't. The soldier who snuck home for tea? He left the front lines for a surprise visit. In 1915, British soldier George Bertram was fighting in the trenches of World War I when he received the news that his mother was gravely ill. Desperate to see her, Bertram walked away from the battlefield, crossed enemy lines, boarded a train, and showed up at home unannounced, still in uniform, muddy boots and all. His stunned mother thought she was hallucinating. After a brief, tearful visit and a hot cup of tea, Bertram turned right around and returned to the war, slipping back into the trenches as if he'd never left. Somehow, no one noticed. The convict who became a war hero. He got out of prison and into the history books. Henry Johnson was serving time in a New York jail when World War I broke out, offered early release in exchange for enlistment. He joined the all-black 369 Infantry Regiment, also known as the Harlem Hellfighters. One night in 1918, while on guard duty in no man's land, Johnson and a fellow soldier were ambushed by a German raiding party. Despite being outnumbered and wounded, he fought off over 20 attackers with his rifle, a knife, and finally his bare hands. He saved his comrade's life and earned the nickname Black Death. It took nearly a century, but Johnson was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor in 2015. The tank that got stuck on a roof. A wrong turn turned into a rooftop rescue. During the World War II, an American Sherman tank accidentally crashed through the roof of a German farmhouse while advancing through a rural village. Navigating narrow roads under fire, the driver took a wrong turn onto what looked like solid ground, but it was actually a thin wooden covering over a barn cellar. The tank plunged through, getting wedged halfway into the building, its turret sticking out like a bizarre rooftop ornament. Amazingly, no one was seriously hurt. Locals later said the tank's sudden arrival scared off nearby German troops who thought it was some new kind of Allied ambush. The balloon bombs that crossed oceans. Japan sent bombs to America by wind. During World War II, Japan launched over 9,000 hydrogen balloon bombs aimed at North America, hoping the jet stream would carry them across the Pacific, and it worked. About 300 actually made it, landing as far inland as Michigan. Most caused little damage, but one tragic incident killed 6 people in Oregon, making them the only U.S. civilians killed on the mainland during the war. To avoid panic, the U.S. government kept the balloon bombs a secret until after the war. Today, some are still being discovered, rusted relics of a strange and silent campaign. The opera singer who became a spy. Her voice got her in. Her secrets got her out. Marguerite Monod, a celebrated French opera singer during World War I, had a secret second life as a spy for the Allies. Her performances gave her access to elite German officers and high-ranking guests, allowing her to eavesdrop on conversations during galas, dinners, and private soirees. She memorized intel between arias, passed coded messages through sheet music, and even hid microfilm in her stage costumes. No one suspected the glamorous soprano of espionage until after the war, when her work was quietly honored by French intelligence. Her greatest performance? Fooling the enemy. The island that changed sides twice. One tiny island, 2 armies, endless confusion. During World War II, the Greek island of Leros became a chaotic battleground between Axis and Allied forces, with control changing hands multiple times in just weeks. First occupied by the Italians, it was taken by the Germans after Italy's surrender. Then the British moved in to support the island's defense, only to be pushed out by a fierce German counterattack. Residents endured bombings, landings, and 3 different flags raised over the capital in a matter of days. The island's strategic position made it a hot potato and a symbol of just how quickly loyalties shifted in the fog of war. The horse who made 51 combat trips. She carried ammo and never flinched under fire. In the Korean War, a small Mongolian mare named Sergeant Reckless became a legendary U.S. Marine. Trained to carry ammunition to the front lines, she memorized supply routes and made 51 solo trips in a single day through gunfire and explosions with no handler. She shielded wounded Marines, hauled over 9,000 pounds of ammo, and was even known to sneak into tents to steal rations. Her bravery earned her a battlefield promotion to staff sergeant, a retirement with full honors, and a statue in her name. Not bad for a war horse that once cost $250. The army that marched on stilts. They trained to fight in swamps by standing taller. In the early 1800s, French soldiers stationed in the marshy lands region of southwestern France faced a bizarre challenge. The ground was too wet to walk on. Locals had solved this for centuries by using tall wooden stilts called échasses, so the army adapted. Soldiers trained to march, shoot, and maneuver on stilts, giving them extra height and mobility in boggy terrain. It worked surprisingly well. Locals even held stilt parades and races alongside military drills. It's possibly the only time in history where an entire unit literally elevated its training for war. The plane that landed itself. The pilot bailed out, but the plane wasn't done. In 1944, U.S. pilot William Rankin was flying a mission over France when his P-51 Mustang was hit by enemy fire. Believing the plane was doomed, he ejected mid-air, but his aircraft kept flying. Somehow, with its controls jammed just right, the P-51 leveled out, glided several miles, and landed itself in an open field, gears up, with minimal damage. Locals were stunned to find the empty cockpit even stranger. The engine was still running. Rankin was later found alive and reunited with his ghost plane, which became a minor legend among Allied air crews. The Queen who led her army barefoot. She fought off colonizers with no shoes and no fear. In the early 1900s, Queen Ya Asantewa, of the Ashanti Empire, modern-day Ghana, led her people in a fierce rebellion against British colonial forces. When the British demanded the sacred golden stool, symbol of Ashanti power, she refused and personally led her troops into battle, often fighting barefoot. Though armed only with muskets and traditional weapons, her warriors held off the British for months. Ya Asantewa became a symbol of resistance across Africa, and her defiance sparked one of the final wars of independence in West Africa. She may not have worn boots, but she absolutely brought the fight. The Viking funeral that backfired. They lit the boat while still on shore. In 885 AD, during a siege on Paris, Viking invaders attempted to honor a fallen chieftain with a traditional funeral pyre on a boat. But under pressure from the ongoing battle, and perhaps a bit too much mead, they launched the ceremony prematurely. The boat was accidentally lit while still docked, setting nearby ships and supply rafts on fire. The resulting chaos allowed defenders in Paris to launch a surprise attack, driving back the Vikings temporarily. It became one of the few times a funeral sparked a military setback instead of solemn reflection. The soldier who stopped the tank alone. With no backup, he stood his ground and won. In 1943, Soviet infantryman Nikolai Sirotinin volunteered to stay behind and cover his retreating unit during the German invasion. Armed with just a rifle and a small anti-tank gun, he took position near a narrow road and waited. When a German column appeared, Sirotinin opened fire. He destroyed 11 tanks, 7 armored vehicles, and killed over 50 soldiers, holding off the enemy for hours before being fatally wounded. The Germans were so stunned by the resistance, they gave him a full military burial with honors. 1 man, 1 field, 1 impossible stand. The castle that fought World War II. A medieval fortress became a last stand twice. In May 1945, as World War II came to a close, Itter Castle in Austria became the site of one of the strangest battles in military history. U.S. troops, German defectors, and French prisoners of war all fought together to defend the castle from a Nazi SS assault. The French prisoners included former prime ministers, generals, and celebrities. It was one of the only times American and German soldiers fought side by side in World War II. The defenders held off the attack until reinforcements arrived, saving the prisoners and cementing the castle's place in one of history's oddest alliances. The warship moved by hand. Out of fuel? Just start pushing? In 1914, during World War I, the crew of the British destroyer HMS Recruit ran aground on a sandbar off the Belgian coast during a critical operation. With the tide falling fast and enemy ships nearby, the crew made a desperate decision. They jumped into the water and pushed. Waist deep in icy surf, dozens of sailors shoved the 1,000-ton vessel back into deeper water, inch by inch. It took hours, and they were fired on the entire time, but the ship floated free and escaped. No one had ever seen a destroyer manually shoved to safety before, or since. The battle fought with frozen potatoes. A food delivery turned into artillery. During the brutal winter of 1944, American forces stationed in the Ardennes ran dangerously low on ammo while under heavy fire during the Battle of the Bulge. In desperation, a quartermaster truck delivering supplies skidded into camp with nothing on board but sacks of frozen potatoes. Thinking fast, the soldiers began loading them into mortars and lobbing them at enemy lines. The rock-hard spuds didn't explode, but they confused and scattered German infantry. buying precious time until reinforcements and real ammo arrived. It wasn't deadly, but it was effective and a little hilarious. The general who forgot his army. He left to get reinforcements and never came back. During the Napoleonic Wars, French General Jean-Baptiste Bernadotte was sent to support Napoleon's campaign in Austria. But midway through, he received an offer that changed everything: become heir to the Swedish throne. Bernadotte said yes and ditched the French army, leaving thousands of men stranded and confused. He eventually became king of Sweden and, in a surreal twist, later fought against Napoleon, his former commander. His reign was a success, and his descendants still sit on Sweden's throne today. The Navy that fought with mirrors. They used light tricks to hide entire ships. In World War II, the British Royal Navy experimented with a top-secret concept called dazzle camouflage. But one version took things further: diffused lighting camouflage. Ships were outfitted with special lamps and angled mirrors to match the color and brightness of the surrounding sea and sky. The idea? Make warships nearly invisible at night by blending them into the horizon. In early tests, it worked so well that some ships nearly collided with their own allies. Though the tech was eventually abandoned, it paved the way for modern stealth techniques and remains one of the strangest naval strategies ever tried. The war hero with a wooden leg. He lost a leg, then led a cavalry charge. Lord Uxbridge, a British general during the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, had his leg shattered by cannon fire in the final moments of the battle. Unshaken, he reportedly turned to the Duke of Wellington and calmly said, "By God, sir, I've lost my leg." After the war, he was fitted with one of the first articulated wooden prosthetic legs, which became so famous it was nicknamed the Anglesey leg. But that didn't stop him. Uxbridge continued to ride, command troops, and even led a ceremonial cavalry charge on a wooden leg. His prosthetic is still on display in a Belgian museum. The sergeant who sank a battleship. One shot, one torpedo, one giant down. During World War II, British soldier Leonard "Nobby" Hall, a Royal Marine sergeant, pulled off a legendary shot from shore. Stationed on Crete during a German naval assault, Hall used a captured Italian torpedo launcher, propped up on crates, and fired a single torpedo toward the oncoming fleet. The result? A direct hit on the Italian cruiser Bolzano, a heavily armed ship weighing over 10,000 tons. The explosion crippled the vessel and forced it out of action. Hall, with no naval training, sank one of the enemy's most powerful ships from dry land. The pilot who landed with no canopy. His cockpit blew off mid-flight and he kept flying. In 1944, American fighter pilot Major William Dunham was flying his P-47 Thunderbolt in a fierce dogfight over the Philippines when enemy fire ripped off his canopy midair. With no windshield, no helmet, and 400 miles per hour winds blasting his face, Dunham didn't bail. He kept fighting. Despite bleeding and half-blinded, he shot down 2 more enemy aircraft, then somehow landed the plane safely back at base. When he climbed out, stunned ground crew found him drenched in oil, blood, and grit, but smiling. His calm under pressure made him a legend among U.S. airmen. The time peace broke out at Christmas. Enemies stopped fighting to sing and play soccer. On Christmas Eve, 1914, along the Western Front of World War I, something extraordinary happened. As snow fell over the trenches, British and German soldiers began singing carols to each other across no man's land. The next morning, both sides cautiously emerged from their positions, shook hands, exchanged gifts, and even played an impromptu game of soccer in the frozen mud. For a brief, surreal moment, war paused for peace. Though unofficial and short-lived, the Christmas truce became a powerful symbol of humanity, shining through even the darkest of times. The soldier who fought in two armies. He was captured, switched sides, and kept fighting. Yang Kyung-jong, a Korean conscript during World War II, holds one of the strangest combat records in history. First forced into the Japanese army, he was captured by the Soviets and sent to a labor camp, then conscripted into the Red Army. Later, he was captured by the Germans and forced to fight for the Wehrmacht. In 1944, American troops captured him in France, wearing a German uniform, speaking barely any English, and having fought for 3 different armies, none by choice. His story is so unbelievable that historians debated it for years until the photos confirmed it. The war that lasted 335 years. No shots fired, no one remembered it started. In 1651, during the English Civil War, the tiny Dutch islands of Scilly declared allegiance to the Royalists, who were at war with the Dutch Republic. In response, the Dutch issued a formal declaration of war against Scilly, but the fighting moved on and everyone forgot. Centuries passed with 0 casualties, 0 battles, and no peace treaty. Finally, in 1986, a Dutch ambassador visited and officially ended the war, 335 years later. Local officials reportedly laughed and offered to buy him a drink. It might be the most polite and pointless war in history. The spy who used her leg as a safe. Her prosthetic hid secrets, money, even weapons. Virginia Hall, one of the most effective Allied spies in World War II, had a prosthetic leg she nicknamed Cuthbert. After losing her leg in a hunting accident, Hall didn't retire. Instead, she joined the British SOE and later the American OSS. Her artificial leg wasn't a handicap, it was a hiding spot. She used it to smuggle coded messages, forged documents, microfilm, and even pistol parts past enemy checkpoints. Hall operated undercover across France, organizing resistance cells, sabotaging rail lines, and earning the nickname the Limping Lady, feared by the Gestapo. The soldier who snuck into his own funeral. He was declared dead and showed up mid-service. In 1915, during World War I, British soldier Private Henry Tandy was listed as killed in action after disappearing during a brutal trench assault. His unit, assuming the worst, held a memorial service in his honor. But Tandy had actually been wounded, captured, and later escaped, trekking barefoot across no man's land back to his unit's position. He arrived in the middle of his own funeral, battered and bleeding, just as someone began reading his obituary aloud. The shocked chaplain dropped his book. Tandy simply asked for water and a clean shirt. The Navy ship that disappeared twice. It vanished from radar and from memory. In 1943, the U.S. Navy destroyer escort USS Eldridge was part of a top-secret experiment allegedly aimed at making ships invisible to radar. According to conspiracy lore, the Philadelphia experiment caused the ship to briefly vanish, reappear hundreds of miles away, and then return, leaving crew members disoriented, injured, or in some accounts, fused to the metal walls. Though the Navy denied everything and declassified documents show nothing unusual, the story refuses to die. Whether myth or misunderstood tech test, it's still one of the most famous disappearances in wartime history. The battle that inspired a board game. Real strategy became tabletop legend. The 1824 Battle of Leipzig, one of the largest conflicts in the Napoleonic Wars, didn't just reshape Europe, It later inspired the creation of modern war games. Prussian officer Georg Heinrich Rudolf Johann von Reiswitz developed a system to simulate battlefield tactics using miniature soldiers, dice, and maps, essentially inventing the first official war board game. It became so effective that the Prussian military adopted it for officer training. The idea spread across Europe, eventually inspiring recreational war games like Risk and Stratego, turning real warfare into tabletop strategy. The doctor who amputated his own arm. Trapped behind lines, he became his own surgeon. During the brutal Soviet-Finnish Winter War, Finnish doctor Eero Mäkelä was injured in a mortar blast that crushed and infected his left arm. Stranded alone in the forest with no help in sight, Mäkelä made the unthinkable decision. He amputated his own arm using only a knife and field dressing gear. After performing the grisly surgery, he hiked nearly 20 miles through snow and enemy territory to reach a friendly outpost, where he calmly asked for a clean bandage. He survived, continued to serve, and became a legend in Finnish medical history. The soldier who used an umbrella as armor. He shielded himself from bullets using a common accessory. During the Battle of Rorke's Drift in 1879 amid the Anglo-Zulu War, British rifleman Edward Teddy Collins faced a fierce onslaught. With Zulu spears and bullets whizzing past, Collins found himself exposed during a desperate counterattack. In a moment of desperate ingenuity, he grabbed his ornate umbrella, a remnant of peacetime propriety, and held it aloft. Remarkably, the sturdy umbrella deflected several incoming projectiles and even a thrown spear, giving him enough cover to rally his fellow soldiers. The battered accessory quickly became a symbol of resourcefulness under fire and was later enshrined as one of the war's most unexpected relics. The time a war paused for a bear. Enemy fire stopped for one very unusual soldier. During World War II, Polish troops fighting alongside the British adopted a very unconventional comrade, a Syrian brown bear named Wojtek. Raised from a cub, Wojtek was enlisted as an official private in the Polish army. He marched, saluted, and even helped carry artillery shells during the Battle of Monte Cassino. In one intense moment, enemy fire actually paused when Axis troops spotted a bear hauling ammo across the battlefield, believing it had to be a hallucination. Wojtek survived the war and retired at a zoo in Scotland, where veterans visited him like an old war buddy. The spy who sent messages in laundry. Her clothesline was a code book. During World War II, French resistance fighter Madame Anne-Marie Bernard operated a safe house in occupied France. But her most ingenious tool wasn't a radio or a weapon, it was her laundry line. Using a secret code developed with the local fighters, she would hang different garments in specific orders and colors to signal everything from all clear to enemy nearby. A red dress might mean supplies had arrived, while a white shirt could indicate an escape route was open. German patrols passed her house daily, never realizing that intelligence was blowing in the breeze right above their heads. The castle guarded by bees. Nature became a secret weapon. During a medieval siege in the 10th century, the defenders of Château de Langeais in France ran low on arrows and boiling oil. But they had one unexpected resource: beehives. The castle's defenders launched clay pots filled with angry bees over the walls at attacking soldiers. When the pots shattered, swarms erupted, stinging and disorienting the enemy ranks. The bizarre tactic worked. The attackers were thrown into chaos, and the siege was lifted within days. It's one of the earliest recorded uses of biological warfare, and possibly the most annoying. The codebreaker who loved crosswords. Puzzles trained the mind that cracked enigma. Before World War II, Alan Turing, the brilliant mathematician who would go on to help crack the Nazi Enigma code, had an unusual obsession: crossword puzzles. He was so fast and accurate that British intelligence agencies began recruiting top crossword solvers from newspaper competitions to join his code-breaking team at Bletchley Park. One MI6 job posting even used a crossword as part of the application test. The logic and pattern recognition honed through puzzles became critical tools in decoding enemy transmissions and ultimately shortened the war by years. The war that started with a pig. One hog nearly triggered a global crisis. In 1859, on San Juan Island between the US and British Canada, an American farmer found a British-owned pig rooting through his potato patch. Furious, he shot it. The pig's owner demanded compensation, tempers flared, and within days, both British and American troops were deployed to the island over a pig. For months, armed camps faced each other down, and war nearly broke out between two global powers. Cooler heads eventually prevailed, and the pig war ended with 0 human casualties, just one very unlucky hog and a lot of diplomatic paperwork. The battle won by bagpipes. Music led the charge, literally. During World War I, Scottish soldier William Piper Bill Millen became famous for doing something utterly surreal: playing the bagpipes while storming the beaches of Normandy on D-Day. Unarmed except for his pipes, Millen walked up and down the shoreline under heavy fire, blasting traditional Scottish tunes to inspire his comrades. German snipers reportedly refused to shoot him, thinking he had lost his mind. His fearless piping boosted morale and became legend. When asked why he did it, Millen simply said, "It seemed the right thing to do." The general who fought while dying. He kept commanding with a bullet in his chest. In 1809, Austrian General Johann Collerat was mortally wounded during the Battle of Wagram, but instead of stepping down, he refused medical treatment and insisted on continuing to lead his troops. Propped up on horseback, pale and bleeding, he issued orders, repositioned artillery, and even encouraged younger officers until he physically collapsed hours later. His final commands helped delay the French advance and prevent a total rout. He died shortly after the battle, but not before reminding everyone that leadership doesn't always need a pulse to be felt. The warship made of ice. It was part battleship, part iceberg. During World War II, the British devised an ambitious and bizarre plan called Project Habakkuk to build a massive aircraft carrier out of ice, not just any ice, pykrete, a frozen blend of water and wood pulp that was tougher than steel and resistant to melting. The prototype, built on a Canadian lake, amazed onlookers by absorbing bullets and artillery shells without cracking. The full version would have been 2,000 feet long with a crew of thousands. The project was eventually scrapped due to cost and changing war needs, but for a moment, the Allies really did try to float a glacier into battle. The samurai who defied a gunfight. He charged bullets with a sword and lived. During the Satsuma Rebellion in 1877, traditional Japanese samurai clashed with Japan's modern imperial army, armed with rifles and artillery. In one legendary moment, a lone samurai named Beppu Shinsuke charged a gun line at the Battle of Shiroyama, wielding only a katana. As bullets tore past him, he cut down several riflemen and survived long enough to inspire a final charge from his fellow rebels. Though the samurai were ultimately defeated, Beppu's fearless stand became symbolic of honor over firepower and marked the end of Japan's warrior era in a blaze of steel and spirit. The soldier who wore a fox as a hat. His helmet was alive, and it bit. During the brutal Eastern Front of World War II, Soviet soldier Yuri Shabalkin found an orphaned Arctic fox kit while stationed in Siberia. He raised the animal in his barracks, and it grew unusually tame. So much so that Yuri began wearing it on his head like a hat during winter patrols. When German troops spotted him, they hesitated, unsure if he was some kind of sniper or just crazy. In one encounter, the fox leapt from his head and bit an enemy scout, giving Yuri just enough time to fire. He later said the fox saved his life twice. The prisoners who stole a train. They escaped by hijacking a locomotive. In 1943, a group of Yugoslav partisans held in a Nazi prison camp pulled off one of the boldest escapes of the war. With inside help, they broke free, sprinted to a nearby rail depot, and commandeered a German military train. None of them had operated a locomotive before, but that didn't stop them. They managed to start the engine, reroute the tracks, and speed out of the station under heavy fire. They picked up fellow prisoners at hidden checkpoints along the way, turning the escape into a rolling rescue mission. Against all odds, they made it to freedom. The pilot who landed on a rooftop. When the street was too crowded, he aimed higher. During World War II, U.S. pilot Charles Chuck Carpenter was ferrying a reconnaissance plane over Naples when engine trouble forced an emergency landing. The narrow city streets below were jammed with troops and civilians, no clear place to land. At the last second, Carpenter spotted a long, flat rooftop on a partially bombed-out building. With incredible precision, he landed the aircraft atop the roof, skidding to a stop inches from the edge. Locals erupted in cheers. Engineers later had to dismantle part of the building to get the plane down. The rooftop landing earned him a promotion and a lifetime of bragging rights. The soldier who captured a tank on foot. No explosives, just nerve and a wrench. In 1944, during the Allied push through France, U.S. infantryman Corporal Horace Hank Greasley found himself cut off from his unit when a German panzer tank rolled into a village alone. Instead of hiding, Greasley snuck up behind the tank, climbed aboard, and jammed a wrench into the turret ring, locking it in place. He then banged on the hatch with his rifle until the confused crew surrendered, thinking they were surrounded. Greasley marched 3 stunned Germans back to Allied lines at gunpoint, while everyone else tried to figure out how he did it without blowing anything up. The secret navy made of bamboo. They built warships from plants, and they worked. During the Vietnam War, the Viet Cong crafted a hidden navy of bamboo boats, lightweight vessels made with traditional fishing techniques and camouflaged to blend with the jungle. Despite looking primitive, these boats were fast, quiet, and able to carry troops, weapons, and even anti-aircraft guns through narrow waterways and rice paddies. American forces were often stunned to find entire gun crews vanish into reeds only to reappear miles away. The bamboo fleet wasn't high-tech, but in guerrilla warfare it was deadly, clever, and nearly impossible to track. The bugle that ended a siege. One note bluffed an entire army. In 1879, during the Anglo-Zulu War, British forces at Eshowe were surrounded and outnumbered by Zulu warriors for weeks. Supplies were running low, morale was crumbling, until one clever officer suggested a risky move. At dawn, he had the regiment's bugler sound the charge call at full volume. The Zulus, hearing the familiar signal used by British troops just before major attacks, believed reinforcements had arrived. They panicked and retreated, abandoning the siege. There were no reinforcements, just one kid with a bugle and perfect timing. The spy who wrote messages on eggs. Breakfast became a battlefield. During World War II, Chinese resistance groups fighting Japanese occupation devised a clever method for smuggling intel, writing secret messages on eggshells. Using rice water ink, which only became visible when heated, agents would inscribe troop movements, sabotage targets, or coded orders on the fragile surfaces. The eggs were then sold at markets or delivered by vendors to informants. Japanese soldiers never suspected breakfast food was being used to fuel espionage. It was delicate, dangerous, and brilliantly low-tech, proving even an egg can crack open a secret. The pilot who took off backwards. His plane was facing the wrong way, so he improvised. In World War II, British pilot Arthur Jock Hodge found himself on a frontline airstrip under sudden attack. His Spitfire was parked nose in, with no time to turn around. Rather than scramble for safety, Hodge gunned the throttle in reverse gear, kicked the rudder, and used the rough terrain to spin the aircraft 180 degrees. In one seamless motion, he then hit full power and took off straight into the fight. Fellow pilots watched in disbelief as he vanished into the sky, backwards, then forward, then gone. It was half stunt, half miracle, and all guts. The soldier who escaped in a coffin. He mailed himself to freedom. In World War II, British POW Brian Houghton was imprisoned in a German camp known for its brutal security and impossible escape odds. But Houghton had a morbidly clever plan. He volunteered for burial duty. Over weeks, he built trust, then slipped into a handmade coffin, which was supposed to be taken outside the camp for cremation. Inside, he packed food, water, and a tiny breathing tube. Once beyond the gates, resistance fighters retrieved the crate, freed him, and smuggled him back to Allied lines. Houghton later said, "It was cramped but effective." The castle that was taken by climbing goat. An unexpected ally helped breach the walls. In 1327, during the siege of Weinsberg Castle in Germany, attackers struggled to find a weak point in the fortress. One scout noticed a goat grazing along a hidden, steep trail on the cliffside, seemingly impossible for humans to climb. Inspired, a group of soldiers followed the goat's path, scaling the treacherous slope under cover of darkness. The defenders hadn't bothered to guard it, assuming it was impassable. By dawn, the attackers had breached the rear gate and opened the way for their army. The castle fell, thanks to a sure-footed, four-legged trailblazer. The POWs who built a secret radio. They hid it in a teapot. Inside the infamous Changi prison in Japanese-occupied Singapore, Allied prisoners of war risked death by constructing a secret radio built piece by piece from stolen and smuggled parts. Using razor blades, melted metal, and copper wire from a fan, they assembled the device and hid it inside a hollowed-out teapot in the prison kitchen. The radio allowed them to receive news from the outside world, boosting morale and helping coordinate underground resistance. Despite regular searches and brutal punishments, the teapot radio remained hidden for years and never got caught. The paratrooper who landed in a bar. His first step in France was onto a bar stool. On D-Day, 1944, American paratrooper Vincent Bud Camarata jumped from his plane over Normandy, but heavy winds threw his descent off course. Instead of landing in a field, He crashed through the roof of a village cafe, snapping ceiling beams and dropping directly into the bar. Stunned French locals watched as he dusted himself off, rifle in hand, and reportedly asked, "Is this seat taken?" Minutes later, he was back outside rejoining his unit. Locals said they never forgot the day the war literally dropped in for a drink. The soldier who fought with a frying pan. When ammo ran out, he reached for the kitchen. In the Korean War, Private James Muldoon found himself pinned down in a bunker during a surprise night assault. Low on ammunition and surrounded, he grabbed the nearest object within reach, a steel frying pan, and used it to knock out 2 enemy soldiers in close combat. His improvised weapon deflected bayonets and even a pistol shot, giving him just enough time to recover a fallen rifle and rally his unit. Muldoon's frying pan became a unit legend, later signed by his entire platoon and shipped home. He reportedly used it to cook breakfast for the rest of his tour. The map that was drawn from memory. He redrew enemy lines from a single glance. Captured by German forces in World War II, British scout Arthur Jiggins was blindfolded and transported to a remote POW camp deep behind enemy lines. During the rough ride, he counted every turn, noted the sun's position, and listened for sounds. Church bells, train whistles, gravel, or bridges. Once inside, he secretly recreated a detailed map from memory, including nearby towns, patrol routes, and natural features. That hand-drawn sketch was smuggled out and later used in a successful Allied raid. Intelligence called it the most precise map ever made by someone who couldn't see. The tank crew that forgot the brakes. Victory almost ended in a parking disaster. During World War II, a British tank crew stormed a Nazi-occupied village in Italy, helping clear a path for infantry with textbook precision. After a successful operation, they parked their Sherman tank on a steep hillside to rest. But in their exhaustion and excitement, they forgot to engage the handbrake. As they posed for a celebratory photo, the tank slowly rolled away, gained speed, and crashed through a stone wall, landing perfectly upright in a courtyard below with 0 damage. Locals cheered, assuming it was some kind of bold tactical move. The crew never corrected them. The messenger who ran 150 miles. No horse, no radio, just legs. In 490 BC, during the Greco-Persian Wars, the Athenians needed urgent help to repel Persian forces landing at Marathon. With no fast transport or communication, a soldier named Pheidippides volunteered to run from Athens to Sparta, a staggering 150 miles through rugged terrain, completed in just 2 days. After delivering the plea, he turned around and ran back. Though Sparta's forces arrived too late, Athens still won the battle. Days later, Pheidippides ran another 26 miles to announce victory and collapsed from exhaustion. His feat inspired the modern marathon, but the real run was 6 times longer. The submarine that delivered pizza. A stealth mission with extra cheese. During the Cold War, a U.S. Navy submarine crew on extended patrol beneath the Atlantic grew restless after weeks without fresh food. As a morale boost, command arranged a mid-sea pizza delivery via submarine. A second U.S. sub was dispatched carrying hot pizzas, packed in insulated containers, and delivered underwater using a torpedo tube transfer system. The crew was stunned as pepperoni and sausage floated aboard like treasure. Though unofficial and never repeated, the mission is remembered as one of the most bizarre logistical feats in naval history. Pizza with military precision. The soldier who rode a reindeer. Siberian cavalry had antlers. During World War II, Soviet troops stationed in the Arctic Circle faced extreme snow, ice, and terrain that made conventional transport nearly impossible. The solution? Reindeer battalions. Special units were trained to ride and supply troops using domesticated reindeer, which could haul gear, navigate frozen forests, and withstand brutal temperatures. One soldier, Ivan Konev, famously led a reindeer cavalry patrol deep into enemy lines, confusing German scouts who reported being chased by horned ghost riders. The mission was a success, and the herd got promoted to permanent duty. The artist who painted with mud. Camouflage became a masterpiece. In World War I, French artist Lucien Victor Guiron de Scevola was recruited to help solve a deadly problem. Soldiers were too visible on the battlefield. Drawing from his background in fine art, he pioneered military camouflage, using mud, burlap, paint, and shadows to design disguises for equipment, bunkers, and uniforms. His camoufleurs painted tanks to look like barns, turned cannons into trees, and built fake villages to trick enemy spotters. His work laid the foundation for modern camouflage design, proving that in war sometimes the paintbrush beats the sword. The officer who dueled with pistols at sea. A standoff on the waves turned personal. In 1801, during the Napoleonic Wars, a heated dispute erupted between two British naval officers aboard HMS Tremendous. Rather than wait for formal channels, they decided to settle it the old-fashioned way, with a pistol duel on a lifeboat just offshore. At dawn, they rowed out, stood back to back on the tiny boat, and fired as waves tossed them around. Miraculously, both missed. A second round was halted when the boat nearly capsized. Embarrassed, drenched, and alive, they returned to the ship, where the captain confined them both to quarters for being idiots. The pigeon with a Medal of Honor. She flew through fire and saved a battalion. During World War II, a carrier pigeon named G.Y. Joe was dispatched by British troops in Italy to deliver a critical message: call off a planned bombing. The Allies were about to mistakenly strike a village that had just been liberated, but radio lines were cut. G.I. Joe flew 20 miles in 20 minutes, dodging enemy fire and arriving just seconds before the planes took off. The bombing was stopped, and over 100 soldiers were saved. G.I. Joe became the first U.S. pigeon to receive the Dickin Medal, the animal equivalent of the Medal of Honor. The general who slept through battle. He woke up and the enemy was gone. During the American Revolutionary War, General Charles Lee was stationed at a key outpost when British forces launched a surprise nighttime raid. But instead of rallying his troops, Lee was reportedly asleep in full uniform, having insisted he didn't need a tent. His guards, unsure whether to wake him or not, held the line themselves, successfully repelling the attack. By the time Lee stirred, the British had already retreated. Furious he'd missed the action, he later claimed he'd slept lightly with one eye open. His troops didn't believe him, but they won, so no one really cared. The invasion stopped by wind. A storm defeated an empire. In 1281, the Mongol Empire, then the largest military force in the world, launched a massive fleet to invade Japan, with tens of thousands of troops aboard. But as they approached the coast, a powerful typhoon struck, scattering ships and smashing the invasion force before it could land. Over 4,000 vessels were destroyed, and the Mongol threat was crushed without a single sword being drawn on shore. The Japanese called the storm kamikaze, meaning divine wind, believing it had saved their nation. The name would echo centuries later in another war, with a much darker meaning. The warship that fought itself. A targeting glitch nearly caused self-destruction. In 1982, during the Falklands War, the British destroyer HMS Sheffield conducted a routine missile systems check, but a malfunction in the radar caused its automated targeting system to lock onto its own reflection and initiate a firing sequence. The crew caught it seconds before launch, frantically shutting down the system to avoid destroying their own ship. The incident was quietly covered up for years, but it sparked a full review of autonomous weapons safety protocols. In the end, the only confirmed enemy that day was a confused piece of metal, aiming at itself. The spy who hid codes in knitting. Her scarf was classified. During World War I, Belgian grandmother Madame Levesque appeared to be just another sweet old lady knitting by her window. In reality, she was a spy for the Allies, using her needles and yarn to knit coded messages into scarves and socks. Each stitch and purl pattern represented numbers and letters, which were then passed to resistance members under the guise of gifts or trade. German soldiers walked right past her daily, never suspecting her sweater was classified intel. She never got caught, and her wool work helped track enemy movements for years. The cannon that sank its own ship. One blast, one very bad angle. In 1782, during the Battle of the Sainte between the British and French navies, the French warship Duc de Bourgogne made a fatal miscalculation. As it engaged the British fleet, a gun crew misaligned one of the cannons, firing a shot that ricocheted off a bulkhead and ruptured the ship's powder magazine. The resulting explosion crippled the vessel from the inside, forcing the crew to abandon ship. Witnesses said it was the only time they saw a warship sink itself with its own cannon. It became a cautionary tale in every naval training manual that followed. The soldier who fooled a sniper with a shovel. He turned digging into defense. During World War I, Australian soldier William Bill Scurry came up with a clever way to trick enemy snipers while his unit evacuated under fire. He rigged a shovel and helmet on a stick, timed with a dripping water can that pulled a trigger, creating the illusion of a soldier periodically poking his head up to shoot. German snipers fired at the decoy for hours, unaware the trenches had already been quietly abandoned. Scurry's invention, dubbed the drip rifle, became legendary, and later used in the famous silent withdrawal at Gallipoli. The army that mistook tomatoes for poison. Soup almost caused a mutiny. In the late 1700s, during the American Revolutionary War, tomatoes were still considered poisonous by many colonists. So when an officer served tomato-based stew to his troops, panic broke out. Soldiers believed that they'd been tricked or poisoned by British sympathizers and refused to eat. Some even drew weapons, demanding he taste it first. The officer, confused but cooperative, ate 2 full bowls and survived just fine. After realizing they weren't doomed, the troops devoured the rest. The stew became a camp favorite, and tomatoes slowly earned their reputation as food, not a fatal fruit. The day war stopped for a soccer match. A ball brought peace, if only for 90 minutes. In 1967, during Nigeria's brutal civil war, a ceasefire was declared in the middle of active conflict, but not for politics or diplomacy. It was so people could watch Pelé, the Brazilian soccer legend, play an exhibition match in Lagos. Both sides of the war agreed to halt hostilities for 48 hours so civilians and soldiers alike could attend the game. Armed fighters reportedly cheered side by side, and for 2 days, gunfire was replaced by goal celebrations. The war resumed afterward, but for a brief, surreal moment, the world's most dangerous sport was peace itself. Conclusion. Congratulations. You've just listened to 100 mind-blowing war stories, a whirlwind of bravery, chaos, strategy, and some of the most unexpected moments ever to echo across the battlefield. From dueling officers in rowboats to armies stopped by storms, this collection proves that history's most serious subject is also full of surprises. But here's the thing about war. For every story told, there are countless more waiting to be uncovered, hidden in diaries, buried in old reports, passed down through whispers. These tales remind us that behind every uniform was a human being navigating the unimaginable. Maybe this audiobook opened your ears to the strange side of history, or maybe it just gave you a few unforgettable stories to share at your next gathering. The truth is, the world's most powerful stories often come from its darkest moments, and sometimes those moments are also the weirdest, boldest, or most jaw-dropping. All it takes is curiosity and a sense of wonder to keep exploring. So as we wrap up this audiobook, don't think of it as the end. Think of it as a signal flare, lighting up a new path through the unexpected, unbelievable, and still untold stories that history has to offer. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and remember, the most mind-blowing war stories might still be out there. Acknowledgements. Creating 100 mind-blowing war stories has been a journey filled with curiosity, late-night research rabbit holes, and more than a few moments of, wait, that actually happened? While my name might be on the cover, this audiobook wouldn't exist without the stories, sacrifices, and sheer unpredictability of the people who lived through history's most intense moments. First, a sincere thank you to the historians, archivists, veterans, researchers, and everyday storytellers who've preserved these incredible accounts. Your dedication to keeping the past alive is what made this collection possible. Every strange, shocking, and inspiring story you're hearing is built on the work you've done to make sure we don't forget. To my family and friends, thank you for putting up with my many war facts, dramatic retellings, and the occasional outburst of, "Did you know a bear carried artillery shells in World War II?" Your support, patience, and enthusiasm helped fuel every minute of this project. To the listeners, thank you. Whether you're a history lover, a trivia hunter, or just someone who enjoys a great story, your curiosity is what brings these moments back to life. This audiobook is for you. And finally, to the people behind these stories, the soldiers, spies, civilians, codebreakers, couriers, and unsung heroes, thank you. Your courage, chaos, resilience, and sometimes sheer creativity remind us that even in war, humanity finds a way to surprise us. Here's to the stories that shaped us, the ones we're still discovering, and the ones that make us ask, how is that even real? About the author. Hi, I'm Felix Grayson, and I'm a storyteller at heart. I've always been obsessed with the strange, surprising, and totally unpredictable moments tucked away in history, especially when it comes to war. The chaos, the courage, the sheer weirdness of it all, it fascinates me. That's what led me to create 100 mind-blowing war stories, a collection designed to entertain, amaze, and maybe even make you say, there's no way that actually happened. When I'm not buried in research or chasing obscure historical rabbit holes, you'll probably find me wandering through old battlefields, geeking out over museum exhibits, or sipping strong coffee while pondering life's most curious questions. I believe history should never feel boring, and I hope this audiobook reminded you just how wild and wonderfully strange the past can be. Thanks for listening, and stay curious out there.